I am so sorry about the last connection. The audio wasn't working and I just realized that I hadn't plugged in my headphones, so I had to come off and start again. So anyway, welcome back. We're live again today. Yesterday I spoke about autism and Montessori, and I shared my journey with my son Noah, who has high functioning autism. And I'm really touched by all of the messages that I've received from lots of different people, sharing their struggles and their journey for working with their own children who have autism or are on the spectrum. And inshallah, I will share a lot more. And the good news is that my son has decided that he would like to share some as well. So he's going to give us a deeper insight into what it's like to have autistic high functioning brain. And hopefully this is going to help us all to understand these children a lot better and be able to support them and unlock the potential that they have. So I am really excited about the topic of autism and Montessori, and I have a lot more that I want to say, but I did promise that I was going to do a live about Montessori for the infant. And I've received loads of messages from different people who have really young babies, and they have just found out about Montessori and they want to know what they can do. Some people have thought that Montessori is only for the child once they get to the toddler stage, but actually Montessori is an educational philosophy for your entire life, and you can start from birth, well actually before birth, but in a more kind of direct way, you can start from birth. So what I'd like to address in this video today is some of my advice and tips and recommendations of how you can implement the Montessori philosophy with young infants. So I'm just going to start by explaining that a lot of people seem to think that young babies are not learning, or they don't learn, and so they don't try to teach them, right? In one way, it's really good that people are not teaching them, because we're not interfering with their natural growth and development. So in one way, that's really good. But actually, what's going on is that because we are ignorant about the incredible transformation that is occurring in this young infant's brain, because we're ignorant about it, we're not interfering, but at the same time, we might not necessarily be providing the right environment. And what we see is that often when the child begins walking or begins communicating, then we begin to think, oh, now I can teach my child something, and you begin to sit your child down and try to do activities with them and that's usually when people begin to interfere with the natural path of development. And if you reflect on what an infant achieves in their first year and a half of life, when you haven't interfered and when you are not trying to make them learn something, if you reflect on what they achieve, you will see that they do something that is impossible for the adult to do. They learn to talk and they learn to walk. They learn to control their bodily movements. There's a lot that they achieve by themselves, and that alone is proof to show us that young children from birth are always learning. They are always learning. And because we have this delusion that they're not learning and we step back and we don't interfere, we get now to see how the natural development universally for all children. And then we see that once we begin to get involved and direct them and try to make them learn specific things, then we see that that's when a lot of children will slow in their development. So you can see from that this period is a really important period, and it's showing us that even if we do nothing, the children will already learn to walk and to talk and to so on. But if you use the Montessori philosophy and you apply it to the way that you interact and support your child's learning and development at a young age, you're going to see that they will develop more. You'll see it's not necessarily that they're going to walk faster or they're going to talk faster. It's not about that, but you're going to see that their level of understanding and their confidence is going to be a lot deeper than if the child didn't have that. So remember that whatever I'm trying to say here, this is not advice for how you can interfere with your infant to make them smarter, to make them learn more, to make them quicker. This is not what I'm sharing here. But these are going to be tips of how you can work with the natural development that is taking place in the infant. So we don't want to interfere with what's going on. We just want to support it so that the child can get the most out of those gifts that the child has. So first of all, if you observe the animal kingdom around you, you will see that, the birds will build a special nest for their young. You'll see that the butterflies will choose particular leaves to lay their eggs on. You see that around us in the animal kingdom, the parents are preparing special environments for their young. Montessori said that it's really, really sad that we don't see the same thing happen for our young infant. And yes, we might go out and buy a crib and a pushchair and clothes and so on, but do we actually really examine our environment to ensure that we have modified it and created it in a way that is like the nest that the bird creates for the infant? Because the nest for the chick is specifically for the chick. It's not really for the mother, it's for the chick, right? And do we as human beings, as parents who have a newborn coming, do we prepare our home environment to make it suitable for the child? And the home environment should be extremely homely, okay? It should be beautiful, it should be organized, it should be simplistic, it should be an environment which is consistent. The young infant doesn't need lots of changes. They need an environment that is really calm, really tranquil, really beautiful. Beauty is really important. Dr. Montessori really stresses the importance of having a beautiful environment at all stages of childhood. But for the infant as well, they need a beautiful environment. It's not just a beautiful crib with a beautiful mobile that you spent loads of money buying. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the environment itself has to be beautiful, organized, and simplistic. Even if you don't buy anything, just the way that you organize your environment. You have to think of nature at all times. So that means consider what natural lighting you can provide for your child. Consider what natural sounds you can provide for your child. Consider how you can make that environment for your infant as close to nature as possible and as close to what they experienced in the womb. Because that period, the really young infant period, is basically that transition where they've come out of the womb and now they have to transition into life in the world as we live in. So that environment that you have at home has to, be one that's really close to nature, very tranquil, because what the child is going to do in this first period is they're going to begin to build their sense of trust of the world around them. Montessori tells us that young infants are incredibly sensitive to order. So they have this sensitivity to order. Order is so important because it allows them to feel safe, it allows them to feel secure, and it allows them to know what's going to happen next. And this order is relevant to the environment, as in to your bedroom or to their changing area or to the play area that they sit down. This order is relevant to the routine of the day. So when they're going to, having their nappy changed, when they're being fed, when they're being, played with. We're not saying that you put them on a schedule, but there should be some kind of routine. The infant is really sensitive to routine. And in fact, you can see that sometimes if you change one little thing in the routine of a young infant, you can see that it unsettles them. And sometimes as parents, we do not realize that the reason our infant is fussing and crying is because something in the order of the environment has been changed. I've heard stories of parents who have like a 3-4 week old baby, and they just change the placement of his cot, and the baby is fussing, and they can't figure out why the baby is fussing and why the baby is not settled and why the baby is crying. But then when they suddenly realize, hang on a minute, it's the cot, and they put it back to the previous place, the child is fine. So they're really, really sensitive to order. So we have to do everything that we can to ensure that the environment for this newborn baby is ordered and organized, and that their daily life and routine is organized. Montessori was not recommending that we give young babies a schedule. So we don't feed them on a schedule. We don't put them to sleep on a schedule. Instead, we feed the baby on demand, and we follow their natural sleeping pattern, which is going to naturally develop into a schedule in itself. What we see nowadays is a lot of doctors. Let me just move this camera a little bit to get a better angle, because I can't see the screen. Anyway, what we see with many doctors now is they're recommending to, schedule your feeding times, right? Or to even time your feeding times from birth. And that's not really something that, Montessori recommended. The child will self-regulate. You have to give them that time in the beginning, and they will self-regulate. So usually we recommend feeding on demand and, providing the child with that support so that they can naturally develop their own rhythm of the day, and they will develop their own rhythm of the day. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time. So the young infant is in possession of a special kind of mind, which Dr. Montessori called the unconscious absorbent mind. That means that this baby from birth is unconsciously absorbing everything in the environment around them. They are absorbing the actual physical layout of the environment. They are absorbing the characteristics of the people around them in their environment. Whatever it is that they're exposed to, they are absorbing that, and that becomes part of their soul. And this becomes the programming that they are going to live by later on as adults. So you can see that this period is by far one of the most important periods in a child's life, because they are basically recording everything you say and do and everything in their environment, and they're using that to create who they're going to be in the future. So it's really, really important that we provide them with a really healthy, positive environment that is organized, that is peaceful, that is tranquil, that is happy, because they're going to absorb that, and that's going to impact who they're going to be later on in their life. A lot of people do not realize this, and they think that instead of, focusing on what the infant needs, they think, well, later on when they're older and they can talk and they can understand, and I'm going to, change how I am, or I'm going to be more organized, and they think that, you can do that later on. But actually, this is the key and the most important time, which is before the age of 1, from birth, to ensure that your child is absorbing everything that you want them to be later on in life. And if you look at psychology, and if you look at the work of people who are trying to unlock traumas that are inside people, often we see that those traumas come from that early stage of life. So, you see that most of us are running by our subconscious mind, and that subconscious mind is what has been imprinted in this early stage of life through our absorbent mind. So if you want your child to have a really good imprinting that they are running off as an adult, you have to ensure that this infant stage is a positive, secure, healthy one. And you can do that by ensuring that you are sensitive to the fact that the child has a sense of order, and they need things to be organized, to be predictable. They need to be able to have a schedule that they can predict, that they know what's going to happen. So they know that in the evening they're going to have a bath. They know that the bath is going to be given by their father. So they can predict that, and they know that. They know, for example, that when they want to go to sleep, they're going to be sitting in a particular chair with you, and you're going to rock them, for example. So they know that, so they can predict that. All of this is going to give the child a sense of security, a sense of safety that is going to allow them to get the most out of that period of infancy. So just to ensure it's really clear, safety, security, familiarity, these are all really, really important things that this newborn child needs in order for them to get the most out of this period. It is not suitable to just stick your newborn child in a little car seat and just expect them to just follow you around wherever you're going. They need familiarity. And, my advice is not to have too many, embark the baby with too many new faces and too many new sounds and too many new pictures all at once. When you want to introduce them to something new, you have to do it slowly, 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 according, and observe your child. Do it according to how you see they react to it. So, another sensitivity that the newborn child has is language. So a lot of people will imagine that you don't have to talk to newborn babies, and they will just kind of like make baby sounds to them, or really simplify their language, and that is actually going to harm the development of their language. What the newborn baby needs you to do is to talk to them like an adult. Respect them like an adult. So along your day, whatever you're doing with this newborn baby, if you're changing their nappy or if you're feeding them, you want to be explaining and telling them what you are doing with them. You want to tell them what's going on. You want to tell them, are you hungry? Or I'll feed you now, and feed them. You don't want to just get the baby and feed them and don't talk to them, or just use really simple baby language to signal feeding. No, you want to be constantly talking to your baby and believe that they understand you. And trust me, babies understand a lot more than they give off that they understand. And before a child will ever talk, they will have already internalized the understanding of that language a long time before that. So take this opportunity while your infant is very sensitive to language to provide them with a language-rich environment where you use good English, if you're speaking in English, good grammar, where you read lots of stories to them. And yes, I mean read stories to them from birth. Don't feel that the newborn baby cannot have a story read to them. They definitely can have a story read to them. So read stories to them from birth, and ensure that you are narrating and telling them what you're doing, just like you would tell somebody else who's an adult. When you're going to do something to them, you would tell them what you're doing. And if you do that, you will see that the child will develop their language really easily, and they will develop that understanding. And another thing that I do recommend is that you do baby signing with them, because some children will be able to sign a lot earlier than they can actually talk. So you'll be able to have that communication with your baby. You're giving them another medium for communication before the child is actually able to say the words, before their mouth is mature enough to produce those sounds. And don't worry, baby signing is not going to make your child talk later. In fact, it will most likely make your child talk earlier, because they've learned how to communicate with people, and so that will help them when they come to talk. So they're sensitive to order, they're sensitive to language, and the other one is that they're sensitive to movement. And of course, if you just look at the newborn baby, it's really, really apparent. They're moving their arms and legs around, they're moving their head, they're moving their mouth, and you can already see that they're seeking these opportunities for movement. And this is a really key time in the young infant's life to provide them lots of opportunities through which they can practice their movement. So things like putting a baby in a playpen where they don't have the opportunity to move is going to restrict their development. Swaddling the baby so that they're unable to move their arms and legs is again going to restrict their development. Also, things like giving them dummies and or pacifiers are going to restrict the movement of their mouth and their tongue, and again, that's going to, it's going to impact on their development. Covering your child's hands with mittens and, putting them in uncomfortable clothing that doesn't allow them to move freely, all of that is restricting their movement, and that's going to impact on the development of their movement skills. So you want to give the child as much freedom as possible so that they can practice their movement skills. You want to ensure that they're wearing light, comfortable clothing, that they can easily move their limbs and everything around them. And you also want to provide them an area in which they can practice their movement skills. So the Montessori environment for the infant is divided into 4 areas. Okay, there's the sleeping area, where it's usually recommended in the Montessori philosophy that the newborn would sleep on a floor mat. So you can just kind of Google Montessori floor mat, and you'll see that there's lots of examples of that. So usually people would put their babies to sleep on a floor mat so that the baby is unrestricted and they can sleep there freely. I personally never did that. I put him on a floor mat when he slept in the day, but at nighttime he slept with me, because that's my personal preference, is to have my son sleeping beside me. So it's up to you whether you put them on the floor, but the idea behind it is that you don't want to restrict them by placing them in a cot separate from you and separate from the rest of the environment. The sleeping area should be really calm and tranquil. So look around your bedroom and see, what do you have there that's really stimulating? What do you have there that's really busy? What are your lights like? Is it more of a natural kind of cooling light, or is it like very glaring, over stimulating lights? You want to kind of observe all of those things to ensure that your environment is set up so that the sleeping area is that relaxing, calming area for the child. The second area would be the feeding area. And again, you have to have a familiar feeding routine, a familiar feeding area, so that the child knows that they are safe and secure and they know what's going to happen, where they're going to sit. So usually we would have, what a lot of mothers have nowadays, which would be a rocking chair or a suitable armchair where you would sit and feed the baby, and it would become a familiar chair or area for the baby. And you might not realize, but sometimes just sitting in that chair is comforting for the child, because they've developed this security with that area. And I certainly saw that with my son when he was young, that even sometimes just sitting in the chair with him, he would love it and feel calm and tranquil, because that was a familiar area for him. And the third area is the self-care area. This is sometimes where parents might not realize how sensitive children are to the order and routine, especially infants. It's really important that you organize a changing area for your baby that they can predict, and they can understand that when they're placed on that particular mat, that they are going to be changed. And you talk to them and you explain to them that, your nappy is smelly, so we're going to change your nappy. You talk to them. It's important that that area is familiar to them. So imagine it from the perspective of a newborn baby, where they're lying on their back and they're looking up. Imagine the perspective of the child in that changing area. Make sure that it becomes an area that is familiar for the child. Don't just change them in random places and just roll out a changing mat and just one time it's here and one time it's there, because all of this is going to unsettle the child. And this beginning period is the period where that sense of order is so important, because they're going to use that sense of order to create internal order and to feel safe and secure in this world. If you're chopping and changing things consistently, the child is going to have a difficult time getting used to this new world that they're in and getting, feeling secure and safe within it. So that's really, really important. And then, those are, areas that probably most of you have set up in your house anyway. But what you need to do is look at it from the infant's perspective. Make sure it's something that's beautiful, tranquil, not overstimulating, and something that they can predict, because it's consistent all the time. The fourth area would be the movement or play area. So this is something that you should set up from birth, and it should be in one consistent place again. Usually you would have a small mat on the floor where you would lay the child for during the daytime when they're awake, and in that place they would be able to play or practice their movements. What we would do is usually have a low mirror on the side right beside the child, so that they're able to see themselves in the mirror while they're lying there. They'll be able to see themselves flinging their arms around, kicking their legs. They'll be able to watch themselves. And we would hang mobiles above. And by mobiles, I don't mean the toy mobiles that you would buy in Mothercare or somewhere like that, but the Montessori mobiles. The first Montessori mobile is a black and white mobile, because the newborn infant is not seeing color yet. They just see in black and white. So we provide them a mobile which has black and white colors, and we hang it roughly 30 centimeters away from the infant, so that, because that's the distance that they can see. And with that mobile, they will begin focusing, they'll begin paying attention, they'll begin tracking, and they really, really, really love it. In fact, if you scroll down my Instagram, you'll see I've got a little video of a young baby under it's called the Montessori Mobile. And he's watching it and tracking it, so you can have a look at that video. And actually, this is something that you can simply make from home. I don't really recommend the commercial mobiles that you buy because they're not made to be developmentally appropriate. So, for example, you might go out and buy a pastel-colored mobile for your newborn baby, but right now their eyes are seeing black and white, and that pastel color is not going to help them. Whereas if you give them the mobile that's according to their development, then it's going to be something that's really going to aid them. And after a few weeks, the child will begin to see primary colors. So then we have the octahedron mobile, which is yellow, red, and blue. And we would hang that above the child. And there's a whole series of Montessori mobiles. You can just type that in Google. You can type Montessori mobiles, and you'll be able to see the different examples and a rough idea of when they are suitable for the child. We see that around 4 months of age, the infant is beginning to try and grasp things. So we might change the mobile and place a ring on it that the baby can kind of grasp. It will be a ring on an elastic band so they can grasp and kind of pull it. We see around 5 months or so that the infant begins to be interested in their feet. So then we would give them a mobile that has a bell on it that they can kick, for example, or we would put bells on their socks so that they can kind of shake it and they can see the reaction to that. So these are all things that we're observing what the child is naturally doing, and then we're providing something that's going to help them to unlock the potential that is within that skill that they're doing. Around the age of 6 months, usually a lot of the babies will begin to sit, and then we will provide something for them that's called a treasure basket. And inside the treasure basket, there'll be lots of different sensory items from nature, from around your house, that we would place in the basket, and the child is able to hold them and put them in their mouth and experience and smell them and feel them. These are just some ideas for what you could do with these really, really young babies. But the key point here is that you are observing that natural unfolding of their development. You're observing how the infant is going from one stage of development to another, and then you are providing them with the material, the small material that they need in their secure environment, their familiar environment, so that they can practice that skill. This movement area, by the way, is going to be a very familiar area, because throughout that infancy stage, while they are lying down, they're going to be placed in that area. So they're going to be there for months. They're going to get very familiar with the smell of that area, with the lighting in that area, with the the sounds that are around the area. I really recommend that would be in your living room and not in your bedroom. Some people they want to put it in a separate room, but the reality is that it's nicer for your baby to be near where you are. And if you have the movement area in your living room, you can then put your baby down there while you're sitting and having a chat with a friend of yours or a member of your family, and your baby can be experiencing all of that movement opportunity right there in front of you, which is what they're going to want to be. But if you're putting your newborn baby in a separate room on their movement mat and then you're leaving it, I don't really recommend that at all. And you might not have the time to always sit in that room with them. So I recommend you put it in your living room, especially if you have other children. Make it an area that is, that is familiar for them the whole time. So before they're born, create that movement corner with the mat on the floor and the mirror and the mobile. Create that area and have it consistently there. Just change the mobile or the toys that you're giving, the grasping toys, or whatever it is that you're giving to your infant during that period. So one of the questions that just comes through is, would a newborn be able to distinguish between two changing areas? Yes. And newborns are highly sensitive. They will be able to know that the smell is different, and the lighting is different, and the texture is different, and it feels different. The rest of the question says, if you're downstairs, and you have two separate changing areas in your house, I would recommend that in the first few weeks you just use one first and get consistent with that one. Build your child's security in that, and then you can introduce the second one. But don't introduce them both at the same time, because you want to respect your child's sense of order, and you want to give them the best that they can have in that early period of their life to feel that sense of security and predictability and familiarity with their environment. So you can add it on later. All of these things that you want to introduce to your newborn child, you can do them, but gradually. The first important thing that you do in the first month of your child's life is, build that security, build that confidence, create that environment that is like the nest the bird creates for its chicks. Create that really nesting, secure, lovely environment, and allow your child to become familiar and secure within it. And then you will begin to see that your child is ready to take on more. And one of the ways that you'll see is that your child will lose interest with what they have around them. They'll lose interest and they'll be looking for something more. So you'll know, okay, they've lost interest with the Montessori Mobile, so let me try the other mobile now because they're around the right age for that. Again, observation is really, really key and important to this. So this is just a really, really, really quick fly through what to do with a newborn baby and an infant. There's so much more to add on here, and there's so much deep Montessori philosophy that is connected to this stage. But I hope that I've answered the questions that were sent to me about how you can begin with doing Montessori with your infant. And there's another question about swaddling. So, if you swaddle the baby, you're going to be restricting their movement, and that's going to limit the opportunity to practice those movement skills so that they can develop them. So it's not recommended to swaddle them, and those involuntary reflexes, they will grow out of that. If you really, really, really have to swaddle your baby, then make sure it's very, very limited time, and make sure your child is able to move their arms and their hands. Remember that in the womb, the child had that freedom to move their hands and arms. So who are we to take that freedom away from them when they're born and start swaddling them so that they cannot move? So, give them that space so that they can move their limbs freely. And another question is, someone has mentioned that their baby took about 2 weeks to adapt to a new environment when they moved to their in-laws' house because of the lockdown that we've been under. And you can see the example there that the environment that your newborn has is really, really, really important. And actually, the way that I see it is that for the first year, the most important environment for your newborn baby is inside the house. And most of the time, they're going to be inside the house. And so you have to really prepare that house as the nest for the child. And then, of course, you'll take them out to the park sometime, and you'll take them, sometimes they'll go out and about, but actually the key environment is what's inside the house. Once they feel that safety and security, and they build that foundation of feeling secure and, able to explore, and they have that connection that they know that if anything happens, they know that they've got the safety of their home, then you can begin to wander outside the home a lot more, right? Whereas if the young baby doesn't feel sense of secure in their home, they're not going to be secure to explore as much as a baby who has that. So it's important that in this really early stage, you really, really focus on that security in the home, in that environment. And again, the sleeping area, the changing area, the feeding area, those are the 3 areas that this newborn is going to be going through every single day. So you have to maintain those, the familiarity in that area. If you are living in a situation where you have loads of children, you have loads of things, you live with extended family, or whatever it may be, and it's really difficult for you to completely prepare a room where everything is perfect for the child, just at least do a corner in each space. So at least, if you don't have that skill to be organized, at least make sure that their changing area is organized and familiar. If your bedroom has loads of things inside it and you can't make their sleeping area, really calm and thing, just at least make that little corner. Take away the clutter from there. Take away all the clutter, anything that's inside of the infant, take it away, put it on the other half of the room. Of course, there's still energy coming from that, but at least, it's not in their direct sight. So take the things away and give them that sense of order so that they can begin to develop that security. Let me check if there's any other questions. Right? I know that for some of us, we won't be in ideal situations where we can just set up a whole feeding room for our baby, or a whole, we might not have that. And we might have loads of other children around us, and we have to kind of also meet the needs of the other children. So just keep in mind that it's the area that your infant is in that's the most important one that you keep familiar. Another thing that I haven't mentioned actually is there's this Montessori Infant Mat that it's called a toppuccino, and we use that to hold the baby from when they're born. And we would hold them in that, so if you're passing the baby between yourself and your husband, or your mother, or whoever it may be, they'd be in this toppuccino, and the toppuccino would go between the people. So that toppuccino is going to be a familiar environment for the child. It's going to have a familiar feel, it's going to have a familiar smell. So when the child is going around, they have that sense of comfort that even though they're moving from one person to another, they feel like they're still in that familiar area. So that's another really, really great thing. And if you don't have the budget to buy a toppuccino, because some of them can be really expensive, you can just use the same philosophy with a much simpler mat that you make, that you are consistent, that this is the one that your baby will sleep on, and this is the one that they're going to be handed around on, and so on. So those are just some really quick ideas for what you can do if you have an infant, a young baby, let's say 6 months and below, and you want to begin using the Montessori method with them. It's not about buying materials and buying specific toys or specific rattles or it's not about that, but it's providing the environment that is going to allow them to meet their needs. And right now, the needs of the child is for order, for language, for movement. And they have to have that consistency so they can develop an internal sense of order, and so they can feel safe and secure. That's the basis of what is going on in this stage. And you can do that with nothing. You can be in a wooden hut in a village in Africa, and you can provide that for your infant without buying anything. So it's not about going out and getting lots of stuff, but it's about changing your mindset, so that now, instead of you providing for your child those cute baby items that you wish you can get for your child, the cute little mobile that you liked when you went shopping, instead of buying that, you're providing the black and white one that the infant will actually benefit from and will actually extend their learning. So you're changing your mindset, and you're remembering that even for the baby infant, every single opportunity is an opportunity for learning and development. They are learning every day, and probably they are learning a lot more than we are learning as adults, and we don't even have a clue what is going on. But if you look at the brain science, you'll see that there's so many neuron connections that are taking place. It's phenomenal. It's incredible what is going on inside the brain of an infant. So don't ever underestimate the capability of the infant to learn, and take this opportunity to provide them with the best environment that's going to support those three needs: the movement, the language, and the sense of order. So I hope that's been beneficial. If you do have more questions about the infants, you can send them to me, or put them at the bottom of this video actually as a question, and I'll try my best to answer. And I can't see any other questions here, so I will head off then, and I hope you've enjoyed this video.